The morning Arthur Voss walked into the Caldwell Tower, he was wearing a jacket he'd bought 12 years ago. Not because he couldn't afford a new one, because he'd never seen the point. The jacket was navy, slightly faded at the elbows, the kind a high school shop teacher might wear on a parent-teacher night. His shoes were clean but unremarkable. His watch, a Seiko his late wife had given him on their 20th anniversary, sat quietly on his wrist without announcing itself. He carried no briefcase, just a single manila folder, thin enough that people in the elevator glanced at it and then looked away, already deciding he was nobody important. He was 61 years old. His hair had gone silver at the temples and the rest of the way gray sometime in his 50s, and he wore it the way he wore everything else, without ceremony. He'd driven himself here in a 2009 Ford pickup that still ran because he maintained it himself. Every spring in the garage behind the house in Denton where he'd lived for 34 years. The receptionist on the 42nd floor smiled at him the way people smile at someone they expect to leave soon. "I have a 9 o'clock, Arthur said. "Voss, Arthur Voss." She typed something, looked up, typed something else. "I'm sorry, sir. Can you tell me who you're meeting with?" "Vincent Caldwell," he said, "and his son." A pause that lasted just long enough to be noticeable. "Of course," she said. "One moment." He sat in a chair by the window and looked out over Dallas. The city glittered in the October light, all glass and ambition, exactly as it had been when he'd first come here in his 30s, with nothing but a second-hand surveying kit and a truck that ran worse than the one outside. He'd built his first project, a modest commercial warehouse outside Garland, with 2 subcontractors and a bookkeeper who worked out of her kitchen. He could still remember the smell of concrete on cool mornings. The particular silence of an empty building before the walls go up. The way a foundation feels underfoot when you know you poured it right. He thought about those things now, sitting in a chair worth more than that first contract, waiting for the Caldwells. The Caldwell Group had been a Texas institution for 50 years. Vincent Caldwell's father had started it in the oil corridors of Midland, and Vincent had expanded it into commercial real estate, infrastructure, and private equity across 6 states. Their name was on hospitals, toll roads, a minor league baseball stadium in Fort Worth. Vincent himself sat on the boards of 2 universities and had his photograph taken with every governor since 1994. His son, Brendan Caldwell, was 38 and had the particular confidence of someone who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. He'd gone to Wharton, worked 2 years at a New York firm, and returned to Dallas to take the title of Chief Development Officer. He wore his suits the way athletes wear uniforms, with total ease, like they were simply a part of his body. When Arthur was shown into the conference room, Brendan was already standing, looking at his phone. He glanced up and offered the kind of handshake that communicates evaluation. "Mr. Voss," he said the name the way you say a word you've heard but haven't looked up yet. "Brendan," Arthur shook his hand and took a seat without waiting to be offered one. Vincent Caldwell came in 2 minutes later. He was 73, still straight-backed, with the unhurried movements of a man who had learned long ago that rooms waited for him. He shook Arthur's hand with genuine warmth, or what passed for it, and settled into the chair at the head of the table. "Arthur," he said, "good of you to come in." "You asked me to," Arthur said simply. Vincent smiled. "I did." The proposal was 300 pages and had been prepared by a team of 12. Arthur had read it over 2 weekends, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a yellow legal pad where he wrote questions in the margins. He hadn't brought the proposal with him. He'd left it on the kitchen table, face down, next to a photograph of his daughter Rennie at her college graduation. What the Caldwells wanted was straightforward, a merger. Voss Construction and Engineering, Arthur's company, built over 30 years from that first warehouse in Garland to a firm with 400 employees and projects across the southern United States, would fold into the Caldwell Group's infrastructure division. Arthur would receive a payout valued at somewhere between $200 and $280 million, depending on the final structure. He would be given a seat on an advisory board. His company would continue to operate under its own name, at least initially, with a Caldwell-appointed executive steering day-to-day decisions. In the language of the proposal, this was called integration with operational continuity. Arthur had read those words 3 times and then written one question on his legal pad. Whose continuity? "I want to say first," Vincent began, setting his hands flat on the table, that what you've built is extraordinary, truly. I've been in this business a long time, and what Voss has accomplished, particularly in the infrastructure segment, is the kind of organic growth you simply don't see anymore. Thank you, Arthur said. Brendan leaned forward slightly. That's actually the foundation of our interest. Your infrastructure division is operating at margins we haven't seen in the segment in 15 years. We've been studying your project execution methodology for about 18 months. The way you structure your field teams is, honestly, it's different from anything in the market. It's not complicated, Arthur said. I hire people who know what they're doing, and then I let them work. There was a small silence. Brendan smiled. Right, well, there's obviously more to it than that. Arthur didn't respond to that. Vincent cleared his throat pleasantly. Arthur, I imagine you've had time to go through our proposal. I have, and your thoughts? Arthur looked at the manila folder in front of him, but didn't open it. I have some questions about the governance structure. Of course. Vincent gestured to Brendan. Brendan opened a laptop and angled it toward Arthur, though Arthur didn't look at the screen. So under the proposed structure, Voss Construction would operate as a wholly owned subsidiary of Caldwell Infrastructure Partners. You'd retain the title of founder and chairman emeritus, which is, really, the recognition your contribution deserves, and the incoming executive team would handle operational leadership. Who would the incoming executive team report to? To Caldwell Infrastructure Leadership, which reports to the board, and the board is the Caldwell family alongside other stakeholders, yes. Primarily the Caldwell family. Brendan adjusted in his seat. The Caldwell Group is a family-led enterprise. That's always been our strength. Arthur nodded slowly. He looked at the window. 34 floors below on the street, a food truck was parked at the curb and a man in a hard hat was eating a taco, leaning against a concrete barrier. Arthur watched him for a moment. My people, Arthur said, still looking out. The 412 people who work for Voss. What happens to them? Everyone would be retained through the integration period, Brendan said. After that, workforce alignment would be evaluated on a case-by-case. Workforce alignment, Arthur repeated. It's standard language for, I know what it means. The room was quiet. Brendan glanced at his father. Vincent's tone shifted, becoming more deliberate, more practiced. Arthur, I want to be direct with you. The offer we've put together is genuinely extraordinary. We've valued Voss at the high end of any reasonable market analysis. I don't think you'll find another offer at this level. Probably not, Arthur agreed. Then I want to make sure we understand each other. Vincent folded his hands. This is a legacy-defining moment for you. What you've built over 30 years, it doesn't disappear. It becomes part of something larger. Something with staying power. Staying power, Arthur said. Yes, what's the name on the door? Pardon? After the integration. What name is on the door of my building in Garland? There was a pause. Vincent looked at Brendan. Brendan looked at his laptop. The branding transition would move toward Caldwell Voss, Brendan said. And then, over time, full integration under the Caldwell Infrastructure banner. That's the standard transition. How long? Typically 18 to 24 months. Arthur nodded. He opened the manila folder for the first time. Inside was a single sheet of paper. His own notes, written in the same handwriting he'd used since the 8th grade, when a teacher named Mr. Pruitt had told him his ideas were good, but he needed to slow down and write them where other people could read them. He looked at the notes for a moment, then he closed the folder. Can I ask you something? He said. He looked at Brendan. How many construction sites have you been on? Brendan blinked. In what capacity? Any capacity. I've visited project sites during due diligence reviews. Worked on one. Poured a foundation. Run conduit. Framed a wall. Anything like that. I know. My background is on the finance side. Arthur nodded. Your father? Vincent's expression shifted by a degree that only someone watching closely would notice. I've been in the business side of construction for 40 years. But you haven't built anything yourself. I've built a great deal, Vincent said, and the warmth had left his voice. Just not with my hands. Fair enough, Arthur said. He looked at the folder again. Then he looked at Vincent. I'll tell you something about my company. The people who run my field operations, the project superintendents, the site managers, most of them started the same way I did. Some of them worked for me for 15, 18 years before they moved into management. They know every phase of a build from the ground up. That's not an accident. That's a culture, and culture doesn't survive an 18-month branding transition, Arthur, Vincent said, his tone becoming the measured authority of a man accustomed to concluding negotiations. I understand the emotional attachment, I do, but at the level we're discussing. It's not emotional attachment, Arthur said. It's operational understanding. The room went quiet in a different way. Brendan said carefully, "We have an extraordinary track record of integrating acquired companies while preserving what makes them successful." "You preserve the systems," Arthur said. "You don't always preserve what built the systems. I think you might be surprised at how." "Brendan," Arthur said the name quietly, not unkindly. "I've been watched companies get acquired for 30 years. I know what that proposal means. The language is different every time, but the outcome is the same. You buy the margin. The people who created it are workforce aligned inside of 2 years. And then you're left with a set of processes you don't entirely understand and a brand name that used to mean something." Brendan's jaw tightened. He looked at his father. Vincent leaned back in his chair. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on the quality of a door being closed politely but firmly. "Arthur, you are 61 years old. You have built something remarkable, but you should think carefully about the road ahead. Infrastructure is capital intensive. The market is changing. Interest rates, regulatory shifts, material costs, the pressures on a company your size, independently operated, are going to increase significantly. What we're offering isn't just money, it's stability. Protection, I appreciate that, but..." Arthur picked up the manila folder. "I built Voss through 2008, through 2020, through every rate cycle and material crunch and regulatory overhaul since Ronald Reagan was president." He said it without pride, just the way you'd state the mileage on a truck. "I'm not worried about the road ahead." A silence settled over the conference room that had a different quality than the ones before. It was the silence that arrives when everyone in a room realizes the conversation has gone somewhere they didn't intend. Brendan looked at his phone. He looked at his laptop. Then he looked at Arthur with the expression of someone assembling a new approach. "Mr. Voss," he said, the formality had returned, "I think there may be some aspects of our vision that haven't been fully communicated. We're not just looking at Voss as an acquisition. We see this as a generational partnership. Your name, your reputation would be central to how we present this to the market." "My name," Arthur said. "Yes, the Voss name carries significant credibility in the region, but the decisions would be made by Caldwell leadership, with significant input from, yes or no, Brendan, on any given project, site selection, team structure, subcontractor relationships. Would the decision sit with a Caldwell executive or with the people who've been doing this work?" The pause lasted exactly long enough. "Ultimately," Brendan said, "strategic decisions would align with Caldwell Group direction." Arthur stood up. He didn't do it abruptly. He did it the way he did everything, deliberately, without theater. He picked up his manila folder and tucked it under his arm. "I think I have what I need," he said. Vincent's expression shifted to something that might have been surprise, though he'd spent too many years in boardrooms to let it sit on his face long. "Arthur, we haven't finished the discussion." "I think we have," Arthur said, not unkindly. "You're walking away from $250 million, Vincent said. Arthur looked at him steadily. "I'm walking away from a proposal. There's a difference." He shook Vincent's hand. He shook Brendan's hand. He thanked the receptionist by name on the way out. He'd noticed her nameplate when he arrived, the way he noticed most things, and he rode the elevator down alone, watching the city descend floor by floor outside the glass. His truck was in the parking structure on Commerce. He found it on the 3rd level between a Range Rover and a Mercedes, looking exactly like what it was, a vehicle owned by a man who needed it to work, not to be seen. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. From his jacket pocket he took out his phone and called his daughter. Rennie picked up on the 2nd ring. She was 33, a structural engineer, and she had inherited his directness and her mother's ability to read a room. She'd known about the Caldwell meeting. She hadn't told him what to do. She'd just said, "The night before, Dad, you'll know when you're in the room." "How'd it go?" she said. "I left. A beat. You turned it down." I didn't say anything dramatic, just stood up and left. He could hear her exhale slowly. "How do you feel?" He looked out through the windshield at the concrete wall of the parking structure, gray and unadorned, with a small yellow number 3 stenciled on it. Somewhere in the structure's ventilation, a fan was running steadily. "Fine," he said. "Hungry, actually." She laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes without thinking. "Okay. Do you want to come over for dinner? If you're cooking, I'll order something." "What do you want?" "Anything except sushi. Dad, you've been saying that for 10 years, and I've been right for 10 years. He started the truck. The engine caught on the first turn. It always did, because he took care of it, and he backed out slowly, watching his mirrors. He didn't issue a statement. His attorney called to check in, and Arthur told him there was nothing to say publicly and nothing to do legally. He went back to Denton. The following Monday, he was on a job site outside McKinney at 6:30 in the morning, walking the foundation with a site superintendent named Gerald who had worked for Voss for 19 years. The morning was cold and pale. The concrete was new enough that you could still smell it. "Heard you had a meeting in Dallas," Gerald said. He didn't look up from his clipboard. "I did, Caldwell's." "Yep." Gerald was quiet for a moment. He wrote something on his clipboard. "They make an offer? They did, and?" Arthur crouched down and pressed his palm flat against the foundation. The surface was smooth, level, cured exactly right. He stayed down there for a moment, feeling it. "It wasn't the right fit," he said. Gerald nodded as if that answered everything, because to someone who had worked for Arthur Voss for 19 years, it did. He went back to his clipboard. Arthur straightened up and walked toward the next section of the pour, his shoes leaving prints in the fine layer of concrete dust that settled on everything here. On the lumber and the equipment and the coffee cups and the hard hats. The way the work itself settled on everything, quietly and permanently. The sky above McKinney was lightening toward blue. There was a full day ahead, and the foundation was solid, and that, as far as Arthur Voss was concerned, was enough.